So we're here on Daf Ayin Beis, and yesterday we came up with a theory to try to explain Rav that when the Baba Machteres, the burglar, grabs something of value from the house of the Balabayas and he brings it into his house, and the object is still that according to Rav, the Baba Machteres, when he steals something and the object is still intact, he doesn't have to return it. And we explained that the halacha of Veheshiv Sagzela Shar Gazal has the status of Tashlumin. It's a kind of a punitive Tashlumin. Really, the Ganav could be Koneh the Chefetz HaNigzal, except for the fact that the Torah says Veheshiv Sagzela Shar Gazal. And in a case where he's Chayav Misa, then the Veheshiv Sagzela Shar Gazal doesn't kick in. It's not Chal, it's not active, because we cannot impose upon him a Chiv Tashlumin. And we based ourselves a lot on the halacha of Idis, that we find a mazik has to pay Idis from when he compensates the Nizak, he has to pay from the top quality, the best property that he could find. And in Tashlume Gzela, the best quality that he could find is the object itself, the object that he stole. I mean, that's what the person wants back. He wants him to replace that object. But if it's halacha of Tashlumin, then we understand that Kim Lev the Ramine kicks in, and the fact that he was Chayav Misa at that moment is enough to remove the Chiv Tashlumin of Veheshiv Sagzela Shar Gazal, and then we go back to square one, and he's Conan. And Rava pointed out that according to Rav, where is the precedent? Where do you see that a Ganav has a Kinyan? And that's derived from the fact that a Ganav is Chai for Onsen. And that we call Bershusei Kaime. The very fact that the Gazlan is Chai for Onsen proves that he has Kinyone Gzela. But of course, if the object had not been destroyed, he would have to return the object. But here he's Chayav Misa at the moment that he took the object, because he was a Baba Machteres, and therefore the punitive obligation of a kind of a compensation of a Heshiv Sagzela Shar Gazal does not apply. So there's no power to be mafkia his Kinyan Gzela. So it comes out very interesting, according to this approach, the Chiddush of the Pasuk, Veheshiv Sagzela, is Afkas Kinyan, meaning if not for Heshiv Sagzela, then the Gazlan would have a Kinyan, which is an amazing kind of concept. You know, I called it anarchy a little bit. So that's what we have to understand. Now let's see Rav. Rav is going to reject Rav. It's Lohi. No, I don't accept the logic of Rav. You can't prove anything from the Chiv Onsim of a Ganav in the case to jump to the next conclusion that the Ganav is Kona Kalim even when they're still intact, and therefore the Bab Machteres doesn't have to return those Kalim because he made a Kinyan on them, even though they're still intact. Says Rava, Ki ukimna, ki okmina, brachmana v'rshusei, that which the Torah says that the Kalim are considered v'rshus Ganav, that's linyan onse. That's only, he's like the Bailim as far as a chiyuv compensation for onsen. Aval linyan mikna, but to establish that a Ganav has a complete total Kinyan on the Kalim, Bershusei de Marayu Kaime. The Kalim are still in the reshus of the Bailan, and the Ganav has to return the Kalim. So since there's a Chiyuv Hashava, then even though the Ganav was Baba Machteres, and that's how he was able to steal the object, nevertheless, he has a Chiyuv Hashava. Meaning the Havi Hashoel. I mean, you wanted to prove, Rav, your point from the case of someone who's Chayiv Ba'onsim. Well, what about a Shoel? A Shoel is Chayiv Ba'onsim. He also has that kind of Bailis of Reshusei Kaima that he pays for Onsim, but he never made a Kinyan. And obviously, after he completes the term of lease, whenever that term expires, he has to return the object that he took as a Shoel B'She'ela. And the reason why a Shoel has a kind of a bailus, such that he pays for onsim, is because Kol Hana Oshalo, he gets all the benefits from the object, and he doesn't pay for them. He's not like a socher who rents, like let's say when you go ice skating, you rent skates, right? So you pay for that Hana. In the case of a Shoel, he doesn't pay. He doesn't pay at all for the Hana, and therefore he's considered like a Bailim. He has Hana from the object without paying for it, like an owner, and he has to suffer the loss in the case of onsim. But again, we're not going to say that a Shoel has a complete kinyan on the object. I mean, again, he's like a Bailim in the sense that he can enjoy the benefit free of charge, but still he has to return the object. No one would entertain the possibility that a Shoel doesn't have to return the object. And therefore, says Rava, the same din should apply to a Ganav, that the Ganav has to return the object, just like a Shoel does, even though at the time of the Gneva he was Chayiv Misa. And he's also, in a certain sense, like a Shoel. Again, not literally a Shoel, because the Shoel means that the Mashil, the owner of the object, gave him the object, with his full consent. Here he took it on his own, bekach. But nevertheless, he's enjoying a relationship with the object now, and he doesn't pay for that at all. And that gives him the status of a Shoel, but certainly he has to return the object. So we're up to Tanan. Well, let me just read to you what he has here in these writings. See if we get anything out of it. Bibir Svaras Rava. Why does Rava disagree with Rav? The Rava Cholek al Rav is sover the Ganav Eno Kones Achefetz Leo Shelo. A Ganav cannot acquire ownership over someone else's object. V'had Ganav Chai Ba'onsim. The Chi of Onsim is not because it's his, but Hainu V'Torah Chi B'Achrayus. Because he had such benefit, he gets such benefit when he borrows it. The Torah puts on him an absolute unlimited achrayus, unlimited responsibility. Now that applies, as we saw in the case of a Shoel, and it applies likewise in the case of a Ganav. And a Ganav is going to be Chai for Onsim. Da Torah itila al Ganav Chiyuv achrayus, the Chayv l'shalom afilu al Onsim. So at this point, what we're suggesting is that Rava disagrees with Rav because he holds that a Ganav does not really acquire ownership over the object. He's only Chai B'Achrayus. Again, I find this a weak point because what do you mean chayv achrayis? I could be chayv and achrayis, but not for onsen. Why would you impose a chiv achrayis? The animal that I stole drops dead of old age, so I have to pay for that. I mean, why is that my achrayis? More likely, it's a bailus halacha, meaning that the shoel, because he, like the bailam, he enjoys the benefit of the object, and whatever he uses, he doesn't even pay for it. That gives him a quasi bailus. Then he writes like this: the odi tochen lomar the Rava nami sover the yesh lagan of kinyan bechefetz. So now he's saying a different approach. Even Rava agrees to this fundamental point that a ganav does have kinyanim on the chefetz. It's like some sort of quasi partial bailus. Umishum hachi ganav chay b'onsim. He's like the bailan. So it's not midin achrayus, but rather midin bailus. V'machlokas bein Rav Rava ha'im hakinyan chal miyad od b'shas ha'ones chal hakinyan l'mafreya mishas ha'gneva. So at what point in time does the ganav acquire ownership over the object? Is it from the time of the Masechet Sanhedrin or from the moment of the onus, when the object gets destroyed? So let's just see how that would tie into the machlokes between Rav and Rava. Rav is going to say that from the moment of the Masechet Sanhedrin, the ganav is koneh, and that's Rav, and therefore, since he's chayav misa, we remove the chiyuv hashava. But Rava holds no, that the kinyan that the ganav gets on the object is only when it's destroyed. At that moment, b'shas ha'ones. It's a little bit odd that you acquire ownership over something when it's destroyed. What it means is, from the moment it's destroyed, the kinyan is chal mafreya retroactively back to the time of the Masechet Sanhedrin. But as long as the object is intact, Rava holds there's no kinyan. Whereas Rav holds he already has a kinyan at the moment of the Masechet Sanhedrin, and at that moment he was chayav misa. Od yesh lomar, the Rava moder the hagan of kones hachefetz hanignav v'havi shalom mamish miyad b'shas hagneva. So Rava accepts not only that there is a kinyan for the ganav, but also that kinyan is chal from the moment of gneva. V'chein ami modeh the chiyuv hashavas hachefetz hu midinei tashlumin. Oh, wow. So even Rava agrees to that principle that the heshiv zagzela shar gazal is a din of tashlumin. So it's subject to kimlei b'rami. So what is the machlokas between Rav and Rava? Or more specifically, what is the shita of Rava? So in order to explain Rava, who agrees now that Veishav Zagzel is a din tashlumin, and he agrees that the ganav is a bailam and he acquires a kinyan and ownership from the time of the Masechet Sanhedrin, he quotes here the Shita Megubetzim Baba Kamadaf Ayin. Oh, yeah, this is, I know this from the Meiri. B'shem Chachmei Tzarfatim, the law meaning Kimlei Rai lift our chiv tashlumin shechal midin is chayvus midas v'rak b'chiv tashlum dahavi mi shum risha. He talking lower to be domel as a Rava sover the lochal din Kimlei Ramine lift our gana michiv hashavas achefetz tisvile the chal din Kimlei Ramine rak lift our michiv tashlum dahavi chalos chiv mishum risha. Achiv hashavas achefetz eno chiv mishum risha. Achein sover Rava did not al lo potur agana mitashlum. See, the way he's presenting it, we jumped the gun. We assume that Rav is based on the fact that Hashavas Hagzela as a Chiv Tashlumin is punitive. But he's now differentiating between a Chiv Tashlumin as opposed to Risha. And Rava holds that we only apply Kimle V'Ramine in Risha. And the Chiv Hashava is not Mishum Risha. So he's now differentiating between a Chiv Tashlumin and a Chiv Risha. So Rav holds that this Kimle V'Ramine for a Chiv Tashlumin, and that's Veishavas Hagzela. And Rava holds that Kimle V'Ramine does not apply to Tashlumin unless you're dealing with Risha. So again, I'm just pointing out that this indicates that we didn't understand properly what he was saying. Rav was not saying what we thought he was saying, that Veheshiv Sagzela is punitive. It's a Chiv Tashlumin. So now I'm trying to figure out if it's a Chiv Tashlumin, why does it lend itself to Kimle B'Drabnin? This I don't understand. What's a Chiv Tashlumin that's not Mishum Risha? And yet it lends itself, according to Rav at least, to Kimle B'Drabnin. See, if I borrow from you an object, so that's not a Chiv Tashlumin. I return the object because it's your object. That's called Mamoni Gabah. But in the case of a Heshiv Zagzela, it's a Tashlumin. He's paying up for the object. And he pays up for the best object by giving back the object itself. See, we have a concept called knas. For example, Modu Knas is potter. And knas is a chiyuv that is imposed upon a person by Bezdin. You know, a person doesn't pay knas on his own initiative voluntarily. It's got to be imposed upon him by a ruling of Bezdin. But a chiyuv tashlumin is not imposed by Bezdin. It's there, but yet it's not the same as mamoni gabach. It's based on a chiyuv. I mean, you have three levels here. You have tashlume mamon, which are knas. I guess you have four levels. Maybe you have a chiyuv mamon because of rishus. You have a chiyuv mamon because of knas. You have a chiyuv mamon because of a chiyuv tashlumin, and then you have a chiyuv mamon of mamoni gabach, which is not really a chiyuv mamon. It's just that he's coming to collect that which is his. And Rav is coming to, in a certain sense, take a chiyuv tashlumin and almost make it into a knas. And therefore, if he's chayiv misa, he's not chayiv in tashlumin. Whereas Rav is going to say, no, you need risha. Knas might be risha, but not a chiyuv tashlumin. So again, it's a very thin middle of the road here. That's not here and not there. It's not a knas, but it's not mamoni gabach. The chiyuv would emerge immediately, spontaneously, without bezdin. And if he'd be modeh, he'd have to pay. He'd have to cough it up. It's not a knas. But yet, according to Rav, when we define it as a chiyuv tashlumin, that's enough to activate and apply the principle of kimlei b'derabbanan. What's the difference between you coming and taking that which is yours from me, meaning I'm holding on to your object, and paying for the object? But in this case, paying for the object with the object itself. What's the difference between the two? And then after is going to be Rav Shita and Kimlei Rabbi. But how do we understand that the difference here? It's almost like as if Bezdin Shalmala is establishing the chiyuv moment. Bezdin Shalmata we don't need because the Torah says Veishus Agzel Shar Gasa. But it's almost as if there's a verdict in the heavenly courts that you have to return this object. But if at that moment you were chayv misa, then the heavenly courts will release you, alleviate you of that chiyuv moment, of that tashlumi moment. So your chiyuv tashlumin of Veishus Agzela is there. I mean, it's spontaneously generated, but it's not because the nigzal is coming to collect his own. It is a chiyuv that the Torah is imposing on him to return that object. And Rav is saying that if not for that chiyuv that the Torah is imposing, in and of itself, you would be kona the object because of kinyan gzela. But the Torah says, no, don't be kona the object, you have a chiyuv to return the object. But if he incurred that chiyuv of returning the object at the moment that he was chayiv misa, then Rav is saying, let's apply the principle of kim leib the Ramina. It's not risha. It's not midin rishus that we're forcing him to pay up. But it's a chiyuv tashlum, and a chiyuv tashlum means it's something that's being imposed upon him from the outside, externally. It's not this chayfetz has a name on it, identity, it belongs to him, give it back. No, pay for the object. Again, you're paying with the object itself, but you're paying for the object. I don't think you need Bezdin to establish that chiyuv to return the object that you stole, but it's the Torah that imposes upon you that chiyuv, and as a result prevents you from being kona. And the Torah would not impose upon you a chiyuv if at that moment you're chayiv misa. That's Rav Shit. Now he quotes a sugya in Perek Lunaris in the 3rd chapter of Ksubas, Taf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis, and the Ganav grabs the object from the Rishus HaNignav into Rishus HaRab. He does a Meshicha. And he's chayiv ba'onsim. So where is the object now? It's in Rishus HaRab. As opposed to the classic case where the Ganav takes it into his own private domain, his own to L'Rshuso. So the question now is, that's the sugya, and the Rishonim debate this in Ksubas Daf Lamed Aleph, does a Ganav become chayiv ha'onsim if he took the Gneva into Rishus HaRab, even though he hasn't yet taken it into his own private Rishus? The Nira Levire, the Kaimelon, the Meshicha B'Rishus HaRab Eina Kone Lokea. So there's no Kinyan Meshicha into Rishus HaRab. T'chtei Liknos Metaltel No Sagi Ba'otza M'Rishus HaMocher Ela Be'inan Hachnosa L'Rishus HaLokeach. So you want to sell me an object, I have to take that object and bring it into my Rishus. That's called Meshicha. But if I take it into Rishus HaRabim, that's not my private domain, I cannot be Kona with that Meshicha. Again, we're talking about Metalton, right? So in other words, it might not be enough to take the object out of the Rishus of the Nigzal in order to be Kona with Meshicha. And the proof is he took it out and he brought it into Rishus HaRabim. He's not Kona. So let's say you sell me an object and I take this object into Rishus HaRabim, I'm not Kona. I'm only Kona as the buyer or the recipient if I take it into my own private Rishus. Now we have a Ganav case. And we said that a Ganav is Chai Ba'onsim. When is he Chai Ba'onsim? Is it the moment that he takes it out of the Rishus HaBailim, even if it's in Rishus HaRabim, or no, he has to take it into his own Rishus in order to be Chai Ba'onsim? So that's a Machlokas Rishonim in Ksubas. Again, just to reiterate, at what point is a Ganav Chayiv Ba'onsim? Is it enough that he takes it out of the Rishus of the Nignav, or does he have to bring it into his own private domain? Yeshlomet the Yesod Machlokas hu ha'im chiyuv Ganav Ba'onsim hu mishum da'chefetz havishalo And then he needs a Mashicha L'toch Rishuso. O midin chiv achrayus. Again, I find that concept very difficult, that you could be chayv and achrayus on onsim. It sounds to me like a contradiction in terms. But anyway, im yisod achiv mishum shekonas achem mitzvah shelo nenas. Az yesh lomar shetzorach haknos l'rishuso kidei l'schayv onsim. Mashenkein im yisod achiv b'toras achrayus. Az yesh lomar the chiv achrayus b'otzaah mirshus habaylim. Wow, it's interesting. So, in other words, he's raising the following chakira. He's wavering back and forth about why a god of his chayvonsim is because of bailus or because of Christ. If it's bailus, then he's only chayvonsim when he brings it into his rishus aganov. But if it's achrayus, then once he takes it out of the rishus of the bailim, even though he brought it into Rosh Hashanah, nevertheless, Chal Chiv Achrayus v'Meshich Rosh Hashanah. Ubedoma lezeh, Yesh Lachkar Bedin Shoel Techay Ba'ontzin. Ha'im Zeh Mishum Yesh Lo Kinyan v'Chefetz v'Shalo Nenas O Dilma Techay Midin Achrayus Afil Ba'ontzin. Again, it's a funny kind of word, achrayus. I think what he means by achrayus here is a self-accepted monetary obligation. I took upon myself to pay for the object if it's not returned to you, no matter what happens, even if a tsunami, carries it away. L'chor yesh lithlos b'zeh machlokas hamoraim b'baba kama daf yud aleph ishamin l'shoel olo v'isa sham she'ein shamin l'ganav u'legazlan because of Tosas hainu time of the ganav u'gazlan kanu miyad shotzio mirshus bailan. So again, let's read the language of Tosfos there in Bava Kama Daf Yidal. Hainu time the Ganav Gazlan Konu Miyad Shotzia Mishus Abailim. Vahainu time the Mandi Omar Af L'Shoel. Kaven the Chayim V'Onsim Nimtza Shekono Misho Shotzio Miyad Bailim Vadomim Hu Denischayv Kamo Ganav Gazlan. So Tosfos says that according to that man, the Yomer who holds Ein Shaman L'Shoel, the Shoel has kinyonin, a kinyon b'chefta. He's like a ganav and a gazlan. But according to man, the Yomer Shaman L'Shoel, who Mishalim Midin Achrayus, this Shomer v'lo machmas yesh lo kinyon b'chefta. Okay, that's what we have here.